most people would have walked past. Most people would have assumed it was a scam, a setup, someone using a child to prey on sympathy. But Jake Morrison wasn't most people. The 52-year-old former Marine had ridden with the Iron Wolves motorcycle club for nearly 2 decades, and in that time, he'd learned to read people the way most folks read books. This kid wasn't lying. The desperation in his voice was real, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your hands ball into fists. Not at the boy, but at whatever cruel circumstances had brought him here. Jake held up his hand, signaling his crew to wait. There were 5 of them total, all middle-aged, men who looked like they could bench press a Harley, but would stop to help a turtle cross the road. They'd been riding cross-country for a charity run, raising money for veterans' mental health services, when they'd pulled into this rest stop just outside of Amarillo, Texas. "Hold on there, son," Jake said, his voice gentle despite his intimidating appearance. He walked over slowly, not wanting to spook the kid. "What's your name?" "Tommy," the boy whispered, clutching the bike tighter. His knuckles were white against the handlebars. "Tommy, where's your mama?" The boy pointed toward an old sedan parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the lights. The car looked like it hadn't moved in days, maybe longer. One tire was flat, and even from this distance, Jake could see someone slumped in the driver's seat. His heart dropped. "Boys," he called over his shoulder, "we got a situation here." Within minutes, the entire club surrounded the vehicle. What they found broke every single one of their hearts. Tommy's mother, Sarah Chen, was barely conscious, her lips cracked from dehydration, her body trembling despite the Texas heat. She tried to sit up when she saw the strangers approaching, instinctively pulling Tommy behind her with what little strength she had left. "Please," she croaked, "don't hurt my boy. Take whatever you want, just don't hurt him." "Ma'am, we're not here to hurt anybody," Jake said, already on his phone calling 911. "Mike, get some water. Danny, grab those protein bars from my saddlebag, now!" As they waited for the ambulance, Sarah's story spilled out in broken fragments. She'd been a nurse in San Antonio, working double shifts to support Tommy after her husband died in a construction accident 3 years ago. She'd been doing okay, not great, but okay, until her ex-brother-in-law, Marcus, decided he was entitled to her late husband's life insurance payout. He'd hired an expensive lawyer who knew how to manipulate the system, dragging Sarah through months of legal battles that drained every penny she had. "He said David owed him money," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she sipped water. "Said he'd been supporting us before David died, which was a lie." David couldn't stand him. But Marcus had fake receipts, fake text messages, and his lawyer made me look like I was the liar. The judge ruled in his favor 3 months ago. Took everything. The insurance money, our savings, everything. I couldn't pay rent. Lost the apartment. Lost my job because I missed too many shifts during the hearings. She'd been living in the car with Tommy for 6 weeks, moving from town to town, trying to find work but unable to afford the background checks or uniforms required. She'd been giving Tommy her share of whatever food they could scrape together, telling him she wasn't hungry, that she'd already eaten. Yesterday, she'd sold her wedding ring for $40. Today, there was nothing left to sell except Tommy's bicycle, the last thing his father had given him before the accident. "I told him not to," Sarah sobbed, looking at her son who was wrapped in a blanket one of the bikers had provided. "I told him I'd be fine, but he wouldn't listen. He's just a baby, and he was trying to take care of me." Jake had seen some heavy things in his life, war zones, friends who didn't make it home, his own daughter's battle with addiction. But watching this 7-year-old boy try to sell his most precious possession to feed his mother hit differently. It hit in a place he didn't know could still hurt this much. "Danny," he said quietly, "call Sharon. Tell her we need the emergency fund." The Iron Wolves had a tradition. Every year, they raised money for various causes, but they always kept a reserve, money set aside for situations exactly like this. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things. Maybe $15,000 at most, but it was meant for emergencies where waiting for bureaucracy and paperwork would mean someone suffering unnecessarily. The paramedics arrived and insisted on taking Sarah to the hospital for evaluation, promising Tommy could ride along. While they loaded her into the ambulance, Jake made a series of phone calls. By the time the sun set that evening, he'd connected with the club's lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Rita, who'd dealt with predatory family members before. "Give me 3 days," Rita said over the phone. "If what she's saying is true, and this Marcus used fraudulent documents, I can get this overturned. But I need her to sign some papers. Can you keep them housed and fed until we sort this out?" "Already on it," Jake replied. That night, Sarah and Tommy stayed in a hotel room paid for by the Iron Wolves. The next morning, they had breakfast at a diner. Real food. Hot food, as much as they wanted. Tommy ate 4 pancakes and kept asking if it was really okay, if they were really allowed to have seconds. Sarah cried through most of the meal, apologizing repeatedly until Jake finally put his hand over hers. "Stop apologizing," he said firmly. "What happened to you wasn't your fault. That Marcus character, he's a predator. He saw you vulnerable and took advantage. But that ends now. You hear me? It ends now." Rita worked fast. She discovered that Marcus had indeed fabricated evidence, text messages that were proven to be doctored, receipts from a business that didn't exist during the dates listed. Within a week, she'd filed motions to reopen the case. Within 2 weeks, she'd gotten a judge to freeze the insurance payout pending investigation. Within a month, Marcus was facing criminal charges for fraud, and Sarah had her money back, plus damages for the legal costs and emotional distress. But the Iron Wolves didn't stop there. They helped Sarah find an apartment, covering the first 6 months of rent. They connected her with a hospital that needed nurses and was willing to be flexible about her schedule. They bought Tommy new clothes, school supplies, and yes, a brand new bicycle. Though he insisted on keeping his old one too, the one his dad had given him. 3 months later, the Iron Wolves were passing through Amarillo again on another charity run. They stopped at the same rest stop, more out of ritual than necessity. This time, though, they were met by a different sight. Sarah and Tommy were there waiting, but she was wearing scrubs, clean, pressed, professional, and Tommy was in a soccer uniform. They'd brought homemade sandwiches and cookies for the whole club. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said, her voice strong now, no longer the broken whisper it had been. "You saved our lives. I don't know how to repay that." Jake smiled, the kind of smile that crinkles the corners of your eyes and makes you look younger than you are. "You already did. You got back on your feet. You're taking care of your boy. That's all the payment we need." Tommy ran up to Jake and hugged him around the waist. "I still have my bike," he said proudly. "Both of them. Dad's bike and the one you gave me." "Good," Jake said, ruffling the kid's hair. "You hold on to those, son. They'll remind you that even when things get dark, there are people out there who care. There are people who'll help you carry the weight when it gets too heavy." As the Iron Wolves rode off into the afternoon sun, Sarah stood in that parking lot with her arm around Tommy, watching until they disappeared over the horizon. She thought about how close they'd come to losing everything, how one act of kindness from strangers had changed the trajectory of their entire lives. Tommy looked up at her. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to help people like they helped us." Sarah pulled him close, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "Then that's exactly what you'll do, baby. That's exactly what you'll do." And somewhere down the highway, Jake Morrison smiled to himself, thinking about a little boy who'd been willing to sell his most precious possession to save his mother, and a group of bikers who'd been in the right place at the right time to make sure he didn't have to. Sometimes, he thought, the world works exactly the way it should. Sometimes humanity shows up when you need it most. You just have to be paying attention.